This is the Coaching Life Podcast, episode 39. Hello, coaches, parents, players, officials, fans of sports, whoever you are out there, we're glad that you've joined us for another day of Coaching Life. One of our favorite days of the week has become the days when we get to record a new podcast episode because we're meeting some really awesome people and continuing to learn new things and just be challenged every time. Well, today we're bringing to you a guest who works with football players from multiple levels. He's a high school assistant coach. He's been a college coach, and today he also works with NFL players, evaluating them as part of Pro Football Focus. We really think you're going to enjoy the conversation that we have with today's guest, Brendan Leister. It's a little bit of a change of pace for us, but we really had a lot of fun talking with Brendan about a variety of things. As always, we talk about athletes and developing them, but we talk a lot about the NFL and some specific NFL players and what his evaluation has been of some players that are currently in the NFL, as well as players who are about to be drafted into the NFL. It's episode 39, and it is starting right now.
Welcome back to the Coaching Life Podcast. This is Pat Martin. I'm here with my friend Chris Stewart. Coach, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well.
Good deal. Hey, we talked about bringing some special guests on as we go through the early part of our season 2 of the podcast, and we've got a special guest with us today. It's kind of funny. I think people would scoff at me saying that this individual is my friend, because I've never been in the same physical location with him at the same time. But we kind of met over the internet talking about the Cleveland Browns. That's and
2020, man. It happens all the time.
I
know people who never met their spouse before.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Yeah,
I actually have some friends that happened with. So.
But I want to talk about Coach Brendan Leister here a little bit today. He earned a master's degree in sports science from the University of Akron. He's got experience coaching Division III college football, and he also has experience in Division I college football in the recruitment process during his time at Akron. He has around 7 years of experience coaching high school football and youth sports, and he's now an assistant football coach at Avon High School, which is a Division II school in
powerhouse
in Northern
Ohio.
Yeah. Absolutely. I hope to talk a little bit about them too. He has a ton of experience creating content online in regards to NCAA football and the NFL, and he currently serves as an analyst for the well-known data analytics group known as Pro Football Focus. So hopefully that interests a lot of our listeners out there today. But Brendan, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure for me. I'm glad you're here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I'm looking forward to the conversation. It's always good to jump on these podcasts, and I'm looking forward to this one especially because it'll be fun to talk about something that's a little bit different from what I'm usually on these things for.
Yeah, I know people usually want to bring you, because we're going to ask you a couple things that
we might get into that some of your expertise for sure, because we want to ask you about Joe Burrow. I've got a couple questions about Baker Mayfield too. I'd like to ask. So.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm up for anything. All right. Sounds great, guys.
As Pat and I have been doing this podcast for only about a year, we've got 30-some episodes in, and we're able to look at some of our analytics in terms of listens and downloads and what people are most interested in. And then, of course, you have people reach out to you, and it seems like the most popular, I should say one of the most popular episodes that we've ever done was an episode where we just really hammered on the reality that strength training is going to cover a lot of deficiencies that young athletes have. And so we end up actually talking about strength training quite a bit in a lot of episodes, because it's focused a lot on youth sports and helping youth players who have a desire to play at the next level understand what it takes. And we've got kids that are coming to us in person as well as through social media and the phone and asking us questions about, hey, can you help me make a video, and can you give me some advice and things like that. And sometimes it seems like inevitably the advice that we give is get in the weight room. If you've not yet been in the weight room, get in the weight room. And so we spent a lot of time talking about strength training here on the podcast. And so we'd like to ask you, since you have been a collegiate football coach and you are currently a high school football coach, your thoughts and your practice on dealing with strength training, how important it's been for the success of your young athletes, as well the impact that it's had on the teams that you have been part of.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a differentiating factor. At Avon, I can say it's a huge part of what we do. So, the kids are in the weight room at least from 8th grade, freshman year up. It's really serious. Right now, our assistant coaches are encouraged to be in there right now it's Monday mornings because they got a strength training class now that all the football players are in. But Monday mornings before school, there's lifting at 5:45 a.m. And so assistant coaches are encouraged to be in there with the players. So we're building relationships with them. They have a set, program that they're doing. We have 3 main strength coaches at Avon that are all in the weight room throughout the year, working with all the different athletes in the school. It's not just the football program.
Yeah.
You see it with Avon's entire athletic program, not just football, but other sports too. Avon is, very successful for the most part in all of the athletic programs. And that I think kind of shows through with the emphasis on the weight room and having coaches that are actually dedicated to it. Having coached at, Hiram College, Division III program, like you said, it wasn't pushed quite as hard for the assistant coaches to be involved there. We actually had a smaller coaching staff, which is kind of amazing to think about considering it's the college level. But yeah, we have a pretty big staff at Avon. But yeah, it was kind of a situation there where the strength coach kind of just gave them the program and then they were expected to do it. At Rittman High School, which was, I think they might be Division 7 now, but when I was there, it was Division 6 and 15 and 16. I don't think they had ever really had a great strength program, and that you'd seen that with the results where they hadn't won many games over the years, honestly. And then we had a pretty good strength coach that year who's been involved with University of Akron. I used to work with him, actually. We were GAs together at Akron. GAs in sports science and wellness, not with the football team, but he was the strength coach at Rittman. He coached D-line, and he did a great job with our athletes. And at Rittman, the first year we went 5-5 with him as a strength coach, and that was a huge deal for Rittman. We winning 5 games there. That was the first non-losing season, I think, in 10 years at Rittman High School. So,
nice.
I've seen it up close, the difference that it makes between the great football programs having the great strength coaches and the emphasis on it and the culture built around it, and the ones where it's, a little bit more ho-hum, it's not as big a deal. It's not pushed as hard by the entire coaching staff. And I think really from the head coach down, that's where it needs to come from. And we see that 100% with Coach Elder at Avon. He pushes it hard, and he's got great strength coach, assistant coaches that buy into it, and that's where it comes from.
Yeah, you mentioned the success of Avon High School, not just in football. The football team has been to 3 consecutive state semifinal games. So that's pretty good. I think, in your perspective, as you grew up in Marietta, so you've spent time in Southeast Ohio and now you're in Northern Ohio. I would say maybe a general perspective down here might be, well, when you look at Avon, you're looking in an area where they have a lot of numbers to choose from, and by default the talent's going to be there, more so than an area like in southeastern Ohio. What do you think? And it might be the weight training program, but what do you think is the difference between the two areas in that regard? What separates specifically a football program like Avon High School?
Just comparing to Marietta, it's not comparable. The continuity that's been there at Avon, since Coach Elder took over, and I know he took the program from basically nothing and turned it into a powerhouse within a few years. Not only 3 straight Final Fours, but also 10 straight playoff appearances. I think only 14 losses in 10 years. That's pretty unprecedented success.
Wow,
if you look at other closed enrollment programs around state of Ohio, I'm not even going to just say private schools. I'm going to say also, I think, open enrollment schools. Like, we lost to Massillon. Well, some of their kids come from other school districts. So I think closed enrollment, Avon's about as good as it gets in Ohio. And I know I'm biased, but I think the numbers kind of play that out. But yeah, just comparing with Marietta, a place like that. I mean, there's just no culture from, it's got to come from the top all the way down to youth. I mean, in Avon, the youth program is flush full of kids. I think there's so many youth football. There's so many kids that play youth football in Avon right now. I think that they have their own league where they have enough kids to have their own league where they don't even have to go play like Avon Lake. They don't have to go play district. Yes, I think there's enough teams that they have their own leagues. So they're able to just play, they have like a flag football league, padded flag league. So they don't have to necessarily go to those other, they don't have to play the other school districts. And that allows them to, like Coach Elder can just decide on what the rules are going to be for the league, where they don't have to really agree with what the other school districts believe in. It's a very unique situation. That's where cool. In Marietta, there was a youth league, but there was never that streamlined approach from the very top all the way down. The youth coaches would just run their own playbooks or whatever. It wasn't really anything. And they might have it now because I think, Coach Jason Shobe, who I actually coached with at Marietta High School in 2012, I think he's been the head coach there around 5 years or so. And I know he always felt that was important to have that buy-in from the top all the way down to the youth league. So he might have that now. I haven't really been in contact with him in a while, and I'm not sure how that goes, but I know that back when I lived in Marietta, I mean, that was something that wasn't there. And I think that's really important for the good programs. I saw it up close kind of growing up. The comparable program to Avon, I would say, was Williamstown High School, which is across the river in Williamstown, West Virginia. And they're a powerhouse in West Virginia. And I have nieces and nephews that are in that. They live in Williamstown, my sister's kids. And her boys are going to play football at Williamstown. And I mean, they've won like all these championships and stuff all the way up through their upbringing. Williamstown has a great youth league, and it's all streamlined, very similar to Avon. They're running similar playbook all the way down there. Yep. And there's that continuity. So the kids, they already know the plays. They already know all that stuff by the time they get to middle school and high school. So they're clicking. Whereas a school that doesn't have that continuity, kind of like how it was with Marietta when I was coming up through, where it was a different head coach every few years, a different system. I mean, if you're going against other schools that have had that continuity, the kids are really at a disadvantage because they're out there thinking while the other kids are out there just reacting and playing fast.
Yeah, and from a cultural perspective, it's easier to get buy-in when the kids have been in that program. Mm-hmm. They've been in the program their whole life.
Yeah.
The difference between being in a recreational league and then going to another league and playing, for this guy or that guy, they've been in the same program. For the entirety of their
just because you
career,
just because you transition from one grade to the next doesn't mean that you're making a transition. All you're doing is getting older in the same program, basically.
Right.
I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago about Coach Elder. 3 years. So you said he took the program from pretty much nothing to a powerhouse, which we know, in 3 years. So since you were there, you may have already answered it in the things that you just explained, but what are maybe one or two things that you would point to answer the question, Coach, how did you take this program from 0 to 3 state championship appearances in a row? That's amazing to me.
He didn't take it from ground zero to state championship appearances or anything. What I was saying was he took them from a program that was essentially, average at best, no real like continuity, all that, to he took them to the playoffs in just a couple of years. Okay. And since then it's been 10 years of, playoffs. And like I said, 14 losses in 10 years, a state title appearance in 2011, I believe. But just to speak to what he's done there, I think he's found creative ways to get kids to come out and play. like he's created numbers, and I have never specifically talked to him about how he does that, but I know that a huge part of his philosophy is making the off season so that the kids really have to invest. And he believes, and I've grown to believe that the more that they invest in the off season, the harder it is. The more challenging it is, the more that they have to give, the more likely that they're going to be committed when the season comes around. And you're not going to get kids quitting in August and all that, because the off season is so taxing, I guess, for the kids, and they have to work so hard that it leads to them really, they're completely bought in if they're going to stick around that long. So it gets to the point where, honestly, at Avon, we don't cut players, but they cut themselves, especially by their senior year, because we expect our seniors to be very involved in the off season, and they have to really be bought in by that point. And if they're not working hard in the off season, buying in and investing, then they pretty much cut themselves just with the way that Coach Elder leads the program. So it's a lot of that comes back to the investment, though. And he's a fantastic leader, communicator, detail. He's a straight shooter. He empowers his assistant coaches. Open-minded too, not just an old school closed-minded type of guy. Like you guys kind of alluded to, I have a little bit of a different background. I started out, I wanted to go into scouting. I had coached high school football. As time's gone on, I didn't start out believing in analytics at all or anything like that, but the more that time's gone on, I've believed in it more. And Coach Elder actually appreciates that about me, where some coaches would scoff and roll their eyes. He's created a culture where other assistant coaches want to hear what I have to say when it comes to quantifying things and, data on things. And I'll bring up points that people haven't necessarily thought of because I just have that different perspective, and I'm respected. And, you wouldn't have that everywhere. Other places I've been, there's been conversations where I would just be, you just grow tired and you just don't even give your take because people don't respect it, and that right away. Where Avon, everyone's view is appreciated and respected, and it's just, there's a growth mindset that I haven't seen at other places, where everyone is constantly, pursuing excellence and trying to get better every year and constantly learning and growing. And that, I think that speaks to the success that the program's had over time. And that's a culture that Coach Elder has put into place, because with other head coaches with the same coaching staff, it might not be that way.
Yeah, I think that's a life lesson right there. It's not just sports related, but as an individual, you have to be willing to take all different kinds of information and all different kinds of opinions and thoughts, and be able to look through that and decipher what is important and what's not. So that's a good word there. Speaking of analytics, I know you've spent a lot of time, evaluating NFL prospects, and you've had the opportunity to talk to NFL executives, and you have coaching experience at all different levels: youth, high school, college. Do you have any insight on what just say an average kid could do to increase their chances of making the NFL or even having a successful collegiate career?
I think, work ethic is a huge part of it. Speaking to NFL, I don't think that's something the average kid can. They can aspire to it, but that's such a rarity. You have to be blessed with top 1% when it comes to genes to make it to that level. These are the most freaky, unique athletes in the world. So to just take an average kid that doesn't have the best genes and turn them into an NFL player, that's a challenging thing. But if you put your mind to it and work at it, and show the dedication in the weight room, and you have a little bit of that luck with the athletic ability at the same time, and really hone your craft when it comes to understanding the game at a high level, which is going to allow you to play faster than other kids can and show up on film and make big plays. Yeah, I think there's a chance. But as far as playing college football, which I think is a much more attainable goal for kids, I think something that I think of with our players is sometimes you get kids that they're dead set on either playing D1 or doing nothing. I think that's a huge mistake if you really want to play college football and you want to be a part of it. And some kids are late bloomers. Maybe there's a kid that's not completely developed yet. He goes to D2 and dominates, and then all of a sudden he's got a chance to maybe go D1 if that kid, or not go D1, but go to the NFL, where if those kids are set on D1, maybe they just get lost in the shuffle because they haven't completely developed yet. So I think kids being open to playing D3, playing D2, even FCS, all that. They have to be open to all options and, just consider what's best for them really when it comes to academics as well as their athletic career, because, NFL players come from all those places if that's their goal long term. But I think also understanding their personality too is important, because the walk-on life of a D1 athlete where, they're constantly trying to replace you with top recruits, that's not for everybody. Not every kid can handle that mentally when they've been a starter their whole life or a dominant player at the high school level, for the past 4 years. It might be better for some of those kids to just bite the bullet, go D3 or D2, and maybe you get an opportunity to go dominate early on or get more chances to play early on. So I think every kid's got to try to have self-awareness, but I know that's a challenging thing for all of us to do. But I think those are all key. And yeah, I think work ethic and just really trying to understand the game of football are two things that are within a kid's control that they can really show dedication to.
Yeah, your answer there, I know you want to say something, Coach, but your answer there was basically, in order to get to the NFL, you got to have talent, which is natural. You got to have luck, and you got to have work ethic. Yeah. One of those three things you can control.
Exactly. Focus on the things you can control.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, who's in terms of people that you've scouted, evaluated, who's been the biggest player that you would say that you saw that you gave some coaches or some GMs advice about?
Well, a big one, with the Super Bowl coming up, the one that always comes to mind, because I went to the NFL scouting combine one year. My mom took me when I was only like 19, 20 years old, I believe. And I was 20 years old or 20. It was 2013. And I remember I ran into, it was Norv Turner and Ray Horton. They were in a hotel lobby, and I walked up to them and introduced myself. And they had just become the coordinators for the Browns at that point. So I was really interested in it. And, I walk up to Norv Turner and I, explained my goals at that point. I wanted to work in scouting in the NFL, and those were my goals. I gave him a resume, I think. And he's like, he's like, well, who are your top guys this year? And one of the players that I named Jonathan Cyprian to start out. So that, he's had a decent career, but he hasn't been quite the player I expected. But my big hit was, I mentioned Travis Kelce to him, and I loved Travis Kelce coming out of Cincinnati. I just loved him. I just loved his athletic ability and ability to run routes and get out of breaks, and it's all the stuff he still shows. And that's probably one of my biggest hits. And he's like, the coaches, they don't get super involved in the process until like the Senior Bowl. If they were out of it, maybe that'll be their first impression of a player. But a lot of times their first impression is the combine. And then they just kind of hear what scouts say to them or execs say to them up to that point. And then they get more caught up as the process goes on. So whenever I mentioned Travis Kelce, I could tell he didn't know who that was. And he's like, oh, well, who was his best game against? And I'm like, Duke. Because the Duke game, that bowl game, it was the Belk Bowl, and he just absolutely dominated. Yeah. His athletic ability, he's the best player on the field by far. And I remember saying Duke, and he's like, just a word of advice to you. If anybody else ever asks you, the best opponent that a player played against, it's a lot more impressive if you mention Alabama or something Duke. Like that. And I immediately thought, okay.
Unless we're talking basketball.
Yeah. Well, he's just heard Eifert's the top player, and that's that's what he's going with. So, that's right. So he had already heard, Eifert had just played against Alabama in the national championship. And that kind of speaks to the process, the way that the biases play into these people's minds. And then, he's the OC for the Browns. He probably had some say in the decision-making that they make on draft weekend. And I loved Eifert, too. In a different way. I just thought they had different strengths. I think I had them, tied for the top tight end in that class. But Travis Kelce, I think there was some character things with him, and he fell to the third round. But, we've seen him with the Chiefs. No doubt. That was definitely something I look back on it's pretty cool that I told Norv Turner that he would be good, and he ended up being better than Eifert, who he clearly was alluding to.
Yeah, that is cool. And I thought you were going with Patrick Mahomes, because I know that you were big on Mahomes, from the very beginning. And I remember talking to Brendan, and he was telling me, we should just trade up to get.
When you say we, who are you talking about?
Oh, there's only one team in America, Coach, and that's the Browns. So.
well, really, in hindsight, I think I really regret not saying at the time, like, the Browns should have just taken him at number 1, really. I mean, I loved him. Like, he was the top quarterback I've ever evaluated.
Did you just say, yeah, Pat?
I've been evaluated.
Number 1 was we took Myles Garrett that year.
Right. And Myles Garrett.
If you take Mahomes, though, you're not taking Mayfield later.
We're going to get into that. What'd you say, Coach?
Sorry.
Well, it's just, you take Myles Garrett, like, great pass rusher, but the value is just not similar. I mean, pass rushers are very important. He's a great talent, but Patrick Mahomes is a game-changing talent at the most valuable position in football by far.
We're hearing that argument this year with Chase Young versus Burrow. What's more value?
I mean, it's not even close. But I even think that the Redskins should consider Tua, because with Haskins, who knows? We don't know yet if he's great. So you should maybe take a chance on Tua, or just trade back and get a boatload of picks if someone wants to jump up for him. Because, Chase Young, great dynamic pass rusher, all that, but that's not the singular player that's going to change a whole team. Yep. Like Nick Bosa, I know people point to him, but he was not that for the 49ers. He's a great player, yes.
Yeah, he's 1/4 of a great defensive line. Yeah, right.
Right.
Speaking of Haskins,
so it just comes back to value.
Yeah. Did you think? I'm one of these people that I did not think Haskins was ready to go to the NFL. This is just a personal opinion. I agree. He had an outstanding, obviously a record-breaking, outstanding year for Ohio State. The 1 year that he was quarterback there, but Ohio State's strength of schedule has been atrocious. That year it was as well. He dominated some pretty bad teams. I thought when I watched him play against teams where he was getting more pressure, we saw what we were going to see, the Haskins we're going to see in the NFL. I'd be really interested in hearing your evaluation of Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah. So I was not quite as high on Dwayne Haskins as a lot of other people were. If you just look at like accuracy charting metrics and ball placement and stuff like that, he was never nearly as good as some of the other top prospects that have come out in recent years. And then you also take into account that he, complete liability under pressure, very much just his game would completely disintegrate under pressure. Very poor when moved off his spot, just not good. And that's a very bad trait in the NFL, where you have to make plays in a muddy pocket. You have to be able to make plays off platform, and you have to be able to make those throws. And that was what I loved so much about Patrick Mahomes, especially, was, he has that ability. Well, Dwayne Haskins, he was good from a clean pocket, which is that's an important trait, but he still wasn't on the level of some of these other quarterbacks that have come out in recent years when it came to that. So I wasn't nearly as high on him, but at the same time, I didn't think that another year at Ohio State was going to turn him into a completely different player either. Yeah, that's true. He was going to be the same guy either way. So I felt that he was right to go pro.
Since the hype was there,
he had he had a chance to go top 10. He didn't. He fell to 15. He could have been taken by the Giants. Someone could have traded up for him at number 2. There's always that chance that someone falls in love with you. You just don't know going into the process. They have to commit to go pro way earlier than the draft. So it's a long, drawn out process. He didn't know. He could have been the number 1 pick if the Cardinals fell in love with him. But from my perspective, comparing Kyler Murray versus Dwayne Haskins, completely different talent levels. I loved Kyler Murray as well. So, but that's kind of my take. I think that he has a chance to be a solid starter in the NFL, but I don't see him as anybody that's ever going to take a team completely to the next level, just putting them on his back. I will add one thing though, when it comes to Haskins, he does have a good quarterback coach now, because they did hire Ken Zampese. He was with the Browns. Mayfield's rookie year, and he did a fantastic job with Mayfield. Really covered up some of the things that I thought were kind of deficiencies in his game that we saw pop up a little bit this past season. So I think Ken Zampese is a great hire for the Redskins, and I think he'll do a good job with Haskins.
Coaching,
I agree with that. I appreciate that transition over to Baker Mayfield, because I'd like to ask you something about Baker Mayfield. I was looking at your scouting notes that you wrote down on your blog, which, by the way, is at leisterfootball.com, Leister football.com, and some really nice write-ups on these guys, especially guys like Lamar Jackson. And on the notes that you wrote from Mayfield on April 26th of 2018 scare me a little bit. Because here are a few bullet points. 2017 Heisman. He was a transfer. Of course, he walked on, transferred, but he was a transfer. 23-year-old rookie coming into the NFL. The most statistically efficient passer to that date. Of course, he was surpassed by 3 guys since then, between Tua and Murray, and then, of course, Joe Burrow this year. Fiery, competitive, underdog, overachiever. And the reason this scares me is because those same points could be said about our guy here from Southeast Ohio, Joe Burrow. Now, when you look at a guy like Joe and the things that he's accomplished, how would you compare him to Baker Mayfield? And how do we know that Joe's not going to be another? I mean, I'm not saying Baker's never going to be successful.
Better not be.
But boy, he had a completely different year this year than I think people were expecting him to. In fact, you said, one of the things I found interesting too, I listened to a podcast, Brendan, that you were on where you said, it was, I think, the Uncle and the Young Bucks, maybe is what the name of it was. I want to give them credit. But This was, I think, in May of 2019. So that was before this past NFL season. You had told them that you thought your initial assessment of Baker Mayfield was one, you had some concerns due to the fact that he held the ball until he saw his receiver come open. He didn't anticipate throws very well. He tended to want to escape away when he felt the tackles, when he felt the pocket collapse on him and things like that. But you said you felt like you had missed on him. There was so much hype around Mayfield in the Brown season that you felt like, well, maybe I missed on him. Well, then the 2019 season happened. Do you still feel like you? I don't think you missed on him at all, to be honest. I thought it was spot on when you watched that guy play this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the way he worked the pocket as a rookie, that was something that was stark in my opinion. Like just preseason, I was like, oh, okay, he looks better from the pocket than he did at Oklahoma. I was like, I think I missed. And then the season went on. And there were some of those issues like in the first half of the season, but then the second half of the season, they did a really good job of, I think he just knew where to go with the ball so much better than he did in 2019. Like he's just so much better coach. So he'd get to the top of his drop and you see that decisiveness, that aggression. And he'd put his back foot in the ground. He'd let it rip and he was playing with confidence. And that was just a stark contrast from his 2019 season. I think in 2018, they did a great job of scheming open his first read. So he wasn't getting to the top of his drop, first guys covered getting to number 2. That wasn't really something that was happening very often. Whereas 2019, that wasn't happening. Half the time, I think he didn't even know where he was supposed to look based on the coverage. It just looked like a mess. But yeah, when it comes to his pocket presence and those things, I thought 2019 looked a lot more like what I saw at Oklahoma, where he sees a flash in front of him, might be a stunt from the D line and it might still be covered up. A lot of times it would still be protected, but he would see that flash in his peripheral vision and he would just take off. And then at that point, you can't even protect him, or he would get way too deep in the pocket and then edge rushers can just run right by the tackles and get into his lap. There was a lot of pressures and sacks this past season that were on him. They were not on the offensive line.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say the offensive line played well, but he was unprotectable for much of the season, in my opinion.
Very quickly. It seemed like he wanted to go back and to the right. I was watching the game one time with my wife, who she knows a little bit of football, but not just a wife watching football with you, and she said, Chris, he runs to the sideline a lot, doesn't he? And it's just an observation that a normal person can make, I think.
Yeah, and I think that, defensive coordinators, they knew that he liked to scramble right. That was where a lot of his big plays came from on scramble drills. So in last offseason, I think they game planned that a little bit. They were like, let's make this guy, if we're going to let him escape, we're going to make him go left. And I think we saw that. And they really just didn't have any counters for that. A lot of the big plays his rookie year were off those scramble drills. And that's, he's always been good at that. And I think that part of the thing with him is, I mean, my first impression of him was that he was more of a scramble drill type player. I think he really had to develop from the pocket as his college career went on. His first instinct is not to just sit in the pocket, pick people apart. His first instinct growing up through youth. I mean, we were talking about youth football. I bet when he was a quarterback at the youth level, he was a better athlete than everyone. He would take off running, making plays with his legs. More like people have compared him to Manziel. He's not like that now at all. But that's more of the player he probably grew up playing like. And, it took until his junior year of college to finally really learn to sit in the pocket a little bit more and make those plays from the pocket. And I think his senior year, he made a lot of progress there too. And Lincoln Riley helped with that because Riley creates this insane amount of space in that offense where everybody just looks open almost all the time, especially in the Big 12. So I think, when things don't go right on the field, what I'm saying is his instinct is to take off and run. Yeah. And he's got to learn and develop when it comes to my first read's not open. I don't run. I get to number 2. I get to number 3. I find my check down. Those are all the things that he's really got to learn and develop. And I think that he can do that. It's not something he can't do, but he needs great coaching, and that they've got to hire a great quarterback coach. And they clearly didn't have one this past year, and that was a complete failure, the way that he was coached this past year, because you saw the difference between Zampese versus Lindley.
Yeah. I think that was one of the biggest failures of the Browns organization this past year, definitely. All right.
Do you think
you can't have him with an inexperienced quarterback coach? It's inexcusable.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see the same thing or something similar with Joe Burrow, who's probably going to be on the run a little bit behind the offensive line he's most likely going to be playing with?
I don't think so, because I think that Joe Burrow processes information at a consistently higher level, and he has the ability to pick people apart from the pocket, get from number 1 to number 2 to number 3. He's also fantastic when it comes to pocket presence and pocket movement, which is something I would never say about Mayfield, even as a rookie. He was good in that area at times, but I think some of the plays he made were kind of lucky, and I wouldn't say that about Burrow at all. Burrow does a great job of maneuvering the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, keeping 2 hands on the ball. That's something we haven't seen from Mayfield consistently. I mean, he's been strip sacked a good amount, but I think Burrow, he's also just a more accurate passer too. If you just look at ball location metrics, I mean, Mayfield was the most accurate that PFF had ever seen. And then Kyler Murray came along and he was very close. So then it's okay, how much of this is them? How much of this is Oklahoma just scheming open guys? Because, we should all know just from watching football. I mean, it's easier to throw accurately to open receivers than it is to covered receivers. That if they don't have much separation, it's harder to throw accurately because it puts a little bit more pressure on you.
It's really difficult, though, to throw to standing cardboard circles, according to Lamar Jackson, right? How dumb is that?
I guess.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that. 'Cause
No, I don't.
But yeah,
I talked enough this past year. So. Go ahead, Coach.
But with Burrow, I just think he's about as accurate as I've ever seen. He's got the only thing that could hold him back, I think, is just. I mean, his arm is not the best arm, but I don't see that being a problem at all. He's got plenty of arm strength. He's just very accurate. He's naturally accurate too. I went back and watched the spring game, his highlights from the 2016 spring game, within the past week, and he's consistently hitting guys in stride.
And they were saying that
perfect balls. The strength was his accuracy. You could see it. Just a naturally accurate passer, and that's something that's pretty much impossible to coach. And he naturally has that.
In this national championship game, I think it really came out as well, because that was the tightest coverage that Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and those guys had, and they had some drops. But man, those balls were right there. Yeah. They were right there.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Reading scouting reports online, you hear a lot of this idea that there's nothing elite about Joe's game. He's good across the board. There's nothing elite about him, but he doesn't really have any weaknesses. What do you think? What's your take on that? I think it's a ridiculous statement, but it's a negative that when they say that, they're saying it as a negative.
Well, that's just insane because, I mean, you look at other quarterbacks that have come out of college and you'd say, oh, well, Josh Allen, he's got elite arm strength.
Right.
Well, like, what does that really matter? I would say Burrow has elite. He has elite accuracy, like rare accuracy, rare ball placement. Like I view rare as even, that's for me, that's even higher than elite. Like I haven't seen quarterbacks throw with the type of placement and accuracy that he has coming out of college. And so like that's an elite trait. Like that's a big deal. Like his ability to elevate those around him with his ball placement because it allows your guys to run after the catch consistently, no matter where they're catching the football. Like you're going to create so many explosive plays after the catch if you can throw that accurately. You're not missing behind guys and making them consistently make these great catches. And also, I think like his ability to evade the rush in the pocket and keep his hands or his eyes down the field and extend the play. I mean, that's another trait that's uncommon that he has, and he's very good at it. He creates explosive plays by extending. And some guys just don't have the instinct to do that. Like some people just don't do it. I mean, someone that comes to mind is like Marcus Mariota. Like he has never had that instinct to extend the play and use his athletic ability as a weapon against the defense when it comes to using his arm. He would always scramble to run. He's not really a guy that extends with his legs and scrambles to throw. Burrow is elite in that area too, where like scramble drills with him, defensive coordinators are going to be terrified. They're going to say, we got to keep this kid in the pocket and make him pick us apart. And what's scary about him at a young age, he's showed the ability to do that, which is something we don't see with guys coming into the NFL. Very few. I just don't know of any other guys that have shown the ability to pick people apart from the pocket as well as extend and combine it also with that elite accuracy. I mean, those are all traits that are extremely important. And then you also look at the way that guys gravitate to him. I mean, his team loves him. He's a competitive dude. And, yeah, everybody loves him. I mean, that's huge too. Like this isn't like it's something people are going to talk about and fall in love with. I mean, every NFL team should wish that they could have a guy like that because he has all those traits.
He's going to be fantastic in Miami. He's going to be great.
Where do you think he's going to go, Brendan?
Cincinnati. I mean, I don't see Cincinnati passing on him. Cincinnati, I mean, the same people are at the top that have been there for a long time. Like, Mike Brown's very involved with the operation there. And, like, they took Carson Palmer. It's not like they passed on Carson Palmer. I think that team, like, they'll make the no-brainer decision. They're not going to overthink it like we think of some teams doing.
Do you think there's any concern about, Joe going, you said a lot of nice things about Joe there and actually said he had two elite skills that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but I agree with you. Do you think there's any concern about him going to the Bengals and being successful, as opposed to another organization that has had, continued success throughout the years, or is just, perceived to be a better organization than what the Bengals are?
I just think the concerns, like, is Zach Taylor a good coach? I mean, we don't know. Yeah. It's pretty hard to lose that many games. I'll say that. Like it's pretty hard to lose that many games in the NFL. I mean, even the worst teams, a lot of years,
squeak one
like
out.
They'll win like around 4 games and they lost a lot of games this year. And so, like, it wasn't just a talent thing. Like, usually when you have, like, look at, for example, like Miami.
Yeah.
I consider that. Like their PFF grades were much worse than the 2016 and 17 Browns. But one team was coached by Brian Flores. The other team was coached by Hugh Jackson. Mm-hmm. And so, like, Miami had the worst PFF grades I've ever seen across the board almost, except, like, passing, which was a big deal. Like, Fitzpatrick played okay, and that's part of the reason they won. But like, they won 5 games. And then you look at the Bengals, who graded a little better, but they didn't win 5 games. So, yeah, I mean, that's the question. Is Zach Taylor the guy? Like, because you got to have the QB and the coach. And, like, that's something we've seen in Cleveland. Like, I think Baker Mayfield has – I'm not going to say he's ever going to be an elite guy. I mean, after last season, I thought that might be the case. But now, you see more snaps, and I saw more of the questions I saw at Oklahoma. So now we'll see. But I think, you get the coach and the QB, and now you've got a shot. But you can't just have one of them. That's never going to work if you just have one.
Rough.
Pat's thinking about putting the stripes on.
No, I'm not. No,
I'm a Cowboys fan, so we're not even going to start on the things that.
What do you think
I've
about
been
Dak,
into.
Coach? You got any thoughts?
Dak's a
Speaking
very
of
good
throwing
quarterback.
behind receivers,
What's that? What'd you say, Coach?
Oh, Dak! I think Dak's a good quarterback.
I do too.
I mean, Dak had a good year. He had his best year of his career. I think he had a good rapport with Kellen Moore, and that matters a lot. And we'll see. I mean, he was his QB coach, for the past few years, and then he stepped up into that OC role. It seems like he did a good job, especially early in the season. And that's probably something that's happened in the past too with other good OCs, where their first few games they come out hot, and then more experienced defensive coordinators see a little more film. Maybe they adjust, take away what he wants to do well. It's tough to develop those counters and in the middle of the season when it's your first year ever calling plays. So
Browns fell right into that trap, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's encouraging that like McCarthy was open-minded enough to keep Kellen Moore around. And I think he's empowering him to call plays, right?
he is.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, that's a really big deal. So that just shows that he has some confidence in him, or he wants him to be the fall guy when the team loses too many games. He's going to say, "Oh, well, Jerry, this was your OC. I'm getting rid of him. Now I'm going to call."
That's a great point. I don't know.
Wait a minute. McCarthy's not. Nobody does anything in that organization except Jerry.
Yeah.
Mike could say he could recommend that you get rid of Kellen Moore, but Jerry's pulling that trigger or not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
for
wondered
sure.
why.
But I think I like the Dak Kellen Moore combo though. I like it. I mean, Dak might not be a consistently, elite quarterback.
He frustrates
all of them.
you sometimes. Speaking of giving receivers the opportunity to have yards after catch, that's one of the things that frustrated me with Dak. It seems like his receivers had to turn or jump or reach down a lot to catch balls that, that if they catch that in stride, they're off to the races for at least another 5-6 yards.
Yeah, he did play well this past season though. But
he did.
The point I was kind of going to make is like there's very few players that are consistently at that top level. I mean, there's always going to be some fluctuating with the way that they play year to year, and like I'm a pretty big advocate of PFF grades. Like the more that I've been a part of it, but I've also just seen over the years, like there's such a huge sample size that I think on the whole they're right way more than they're wrong. So that kind of evens itself out over time when you're ranking players. And I mean, we see it with quarterbacks all the time where, like, for example, Mayfield, rookie year he was top 10 in PFF grade. Then his second year he was like closer to 20. And then we've seen it with a lot of quarterbacks where like Dak was in the top 5 this past year. Well, maybe he's in the top 15 next year. I think that's where he was the year before. So there's always some fluctuation unless you're that elite rare talent like Patrick Mahomes, where you're going to be near the top every year. But even this past year, I mean, I think he was, or this season, I should say, he was 6th. So it's not like he was number 1 or number 2 like he was as a second year player. So I think it's always important to keep that in mind that progression year to year is never like a linear thing. It's always just kind of like, there's always going to be ebbs and flows, and no player stays exactly the same year to year.
Yeah, sure. Good point. Well, Coach, we I don't know how many episodes of the Coaching Life podcast you've listened to, but we focus a large majority of our time on youth and high school sports and basically the development of young athletes. And so we like to talk a lot about youth sports. And one of the questions that we always ask, and we made a point to do this with all of our guests, we ask this one question to everybody that comes on, and we'll continue to do that. But the question is, what is your favorite youth sports memory, either as a player or as a coach? Anything that sticks out in your head that that was real enjoyable or real funny or whatever it is. Is there anything like that you remember?
Yeah, one thing, like when I was I coached youth football in 2013. So, yeah, we had like 3 coaches on the staff, and I was very involved with the offense, but we all had to coach, both sides of the ball, of course. And I just remember on game day, like we just try to make it a fun experience. And I remember on, it'd be like a 3rd down or something, and I'd yell. There was this kid, his name was his last name was Heener, I believe, and he's probably already all the way through high school now, thinking back.
Yeah.
But he was 4th or 5th grade. He was a big kid. He was our nose tackle. This was 4th to 6th grade football. So he was actually one of the younger kids on the team, but he was a very good player already by that point. You could tell that he maybe had a chance to grow up to be like a really good wrestler and lineman, long term. But I remember on big plays, like third downs, I'd yell, "Heener, make a play," and he'd look over at me, like nod, and then you'd see him like he'd just wreak havoc on those plays. Sometimes it's just really
Knew
funny.
Someone was watching him.
Yeah. Like as I was a young coach in my career at that point, and I wouldn't necessarily do that like with high school kids. That's not really a coaching point. That's just kind of yelling something out. But it's kind of cool to like point out that kid and be like, "Hey, make a play here. Let's go." It's not necessarily a technical thing or anything like that. But yeah, like you said, he knew someone was paying attention to him watching, and he would usually step up in those moments and make a play. And that's really like the one thing I remember most from that year is just that. That's just trying to make the kids across the board have a fun experience. Yeah. But it was pretty cool when he would do that.
Definitely.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, they respond to being paid attention to.
Sure.
If they know that you care and that you're watching, that's a good story.
Absolutely.
Well, Coach, how can appreciate you being on? How can people find you? I mean, what are you most active on social media or email?
Yeah, definitely on Twitter. I'm most active. My @ is @Brendan Leister. I've been writing a little bit more on my blog, leisterfootball.com. I just wrote some notes this past week on Isaiah Simpson, and I'm trying to get a little bit more back into writing about the draft this offseason. We'll see how many I actually write. But
you did a mock draft for 2019, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I was on the day of the draft. Yeah, I just did it for the heck of it. But before that, I hadn't really written any for 2019. I was writing for USA Football last year, so I was more focused on that last spring and all that. But yeah, you can really connect with me on Twitter @Brendan Leister. If you have questions, you can always DM me. Mention me in a tweet. You can email me if you want to email. It's just brendanleister@yahoo.com. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was a good time. Thank you so much. And if you want to have me on in the future, I'd love to talk to you guys again.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. We'll talk to you soon, Coach.
Sounds good, man. Have a great day.